A little bit about the companies that I founded here, co-founded, and run and operate today. So back in 2008, we started a family business. My dad and I started Albuquerque Computer and Electronics Recycling Company. My dad's a trained engineer and had a long history in the state of New Mexico being involved in the recycling industry. As a member of the New Mexico Recycling Coalition, he became aware that there was a real need in the state for a business to come in and really take seriously the issue of end-of-life electronics and what to do with them. And so we started this business in 2008, really with a goal to keep end-of-life electronics out of New Mexico landfills and really educate businesses on the importance of properly handling their end-of-life IT equipment. Because as we all know, this technology just keeps marching on, and any business that wants to continue to be in business just has to stay up with that refresh cycle, right? But what do we do with those computers when they're no longer of use to our business? So we created Albuquerque Computer and Electronics Recycling Company, which today, I'm proud to say we've diverted over 10 million pounds of electronics from New Mexico landfills. And we work with a variety of organizations, from businesses to residential drop-off locations, and all the way up to state and government organizations. We go all over the country working for our clients here that are based in New Mexico that have businesses all over. And we provide this secure end-of-life chain of custody and data erasure on their old equipment. Through that business, we were able to get our hands on quite a bit of technology and hire some really smart people. And we realized that we could start a full service IT company and really manage the complete life cycle of IT infrastructure for a business. So we started up Abqit IT in 2016, and we realized, one of the reasons we started it is that there weren't a lot of IT companies catering to small and medium-sized businesses. We found most in the market were really going after the bigger companies so they could, focus on driving their revenue. And we wanted to help small and medium-sized businesses take advantage of IT and use it as a competitive advantage, and then also educate them on, the proper way to dispose of their IT equipment and also the cybersecurity risks posed to these businesses, right? Now, as a business owner myself, and I'm sure many listening and watching this, your business is an asset, and it's an asset because it provides value, for your life, for your family. And as an asset, we want it to continue to be one in the future for us. Maybe someday we'll pass it on to another generation. Maybe someday we'll sell that business as an asset, right? And so it's really important to treat your business like as if you had a money tree. If you had a money tree, I'm sure growing in your yard, you wouldn't just leave it out in the open for anybody to come in and take money off the tree or perhaps steal the tree. In fact, you might build a really big fence around it and perhaps even sequence the DNA inside that tree. So if someone were to take it, you could regrow your money tree, right? We like to think of your business as the exact same. So today's first business tip that I'm going to be talking to you about is understanding your business risk. And of course, this is from an IT perspective. Every single day or week, really, we're out there, we're talking to businesses in the community, and we're finding that the majority of business owners and operators out there haven't updated their risk perception with the reality out there of the cybersecurity risk profile. Some of the questions that we like to ask every single business owner and operator is, when was your most recent cybersecurity risk assessment? If your business isn't doing these every single year on a minimum, if your IT company that you're working with isn't coming to you every year and talking to you about, doing an annual cybersecurity risk assessment, that's the first thing that you need to be implementing within your business today. Because, having your head in the sand about these potential risks isn't a strategy. Nobody wants the rug pulled out from under them, especially from some unknown risk out there that they weren't aware of. So the first step in uncovering these types of things that can really take down your business is getting a cybersecurity assessment done on the business, so you can see the potential risks that you might not be aware of today. Here's another question, that every business owner and operator should be asking themselves right now, which is, if you walk in tomorrow, you open up your laptop, you turn on your computer, it's locked up, and you get a screen that looks like this. Your computer's been encrypted. It's going to be impossible for you to decrypt this. The only way to get access to your device, your files, everything on there is to start the decryption process that the hackers have implemented, right? Of course, step one in that is they're going to be requesting a sum of money from you. So, you need to ask yourself, what are you going to do if you walk in and your computer's locked up like that? Do you have an incident response plan in place that you can refer to? Hopefully it's not saved on your computer, right? Hopefully you have some sort of incident response plan that's a physical hard copy that you could pick up and look at and follow step one. This is exactly the plan in case this type of problem arises for you. And then number three, is your business under any legal obligations or compliance regulatory obligations in case of a data breach? So we'll get into some of this right now. Now, just in case you're thinking here, Greg, listen, I hear about things in the news, there's entities like major public school systems or the county, that you read about, they're getting ransomed, their systems are getting locked up. We read about the impact of that on these organizations, and yeah, it can be devastating. But come on, those are big organizations. They make the news. We read about these things, and they're a big deal. Surely they're not coming after my small business, right? Well, you might be surprised here on what the impact is and how much of a target your small business is. So just as an example here, let's talk about some of the impact of what this might look like if this happens to your computer. Even if you do have incident response plans in place, I'm going to share with you some data here on what the average kind of impact to a business looks like. So on average, the ransom payment that they're requesting for you to unlock your computer systems is $136,000. The mean is $47,000. So just imagine the impact on your business right now. If you're asked to write a check for that amount to have your systems unlocked. So that alone is a tremendous financial impact on the business right there. Then you have average days of downtime, which is 23. So a lot of times, even if a ransom gets paid, it's not as simple as flipping a switch and everything gets unencrypted. The unencryption tools don't necessarily work that great. And, they're not under a huge amount of incentive to even help you get your systems back online. So on average, it takes 23 days for a business to get online after a ransomware event. So that's another factor of cost that needs to be considered. It's very simple to take your annual revenue divided by 365 days, multiply it by 23, and that's amount of dollars that you can expect to lose from a revenue perspective just in having your systems down. Then you have reputational impact and that kind of thing. All those types of impacts need to be considered when you're asking yourself these questions. What if I walk in tomorrow and I'm facing one of these screens on my computer? Now, again, you might be saying, hey, this probably only happens to bigger companies, right? I'm sort of a zebra in the herd running with all the other zebras. What are the chances they're going to pick me out of there? Don't they go after bigger, richer targets? Well, here's the data here from Covware. And, what we see is that the light blue in the lower left-hand portion, that's companies with a headcount of 11 to 100 people. So, that's 30% of the ransomware attacks today are on businesses 11 to 100 people. Then you have the pink slice up on the top right is an employee count of 1 to 10 people. So this is definitely 6.6%, very small businesses being targeted. And then that big dark blue portion is businesses of 101 to 1,000. So what we would call medium range businesses. So really a full 3/4 easily is small to medium sized businesses that are taking by far the majority of ransom attacks. There's lots of reasons for that. if you're a criminal actor and you target a very high profile, say pipeline, for example, it's going to get national attention and it's going to get heads of state attention, right? And most of the time, these criminal actors don't want that kind of attention. And so they target small and medium-sized businesses because it's a lot less likely to get attention of authorities. And, quite frankly, these businesses are a lot easier targets. They don't have the budget. And like I was saying, they don't have the risk perception that they are targets. And so it's a lot easier for these criminal actors to spend their time on these small to medium-sized businesses. So the likelihood is far greater of suffering a ransom event if you're in the small to medium-sized business category versus the large category. So we talked about some of the costs here in just direct ransom payments, in downtime, then there's reputation to deal with, that kind of thing. What about legal requirements? Do you know the legal requirements for your business if you were to suffer a data breach, right? And before I jump into that, even if you have great backups on your systems and you think you can restore from those backups, that's something that should be tested in a cybersecurity risk assessment every year. But the type of ransom that's most commonly perpetrated nowadays is what we call a double ransom. And it does more than just give you this screen locking up your system. They do a double ransom. This is the one part of it. The second part of it is, they only lock up your system after they've exfiltrated any useful and valuable information that they were able to get off of your systems. So they're looking for all types of, personal information that they can sell on the dark web, names, social security numbers, birthdays, driver's licenses, all that type of information. They're taking out of your systems before they lock it up. And then they tell you, look, even if you're able to restore without our unencryption keys, we're going to publish everything we took, all your business financial information, all your trade secrets, any secret files, confidential stuff. We're going to publish it all on our own dark web servers that you have zero control over if you don't pay the ransom. So, different entities are left in a situation where even if they can technically restore from these events, they still have the public and PR nightmare of all this information getting published on the hacker servers, which there's nothing they can do about that. And then that leaves you with, legal obligations as well. So if you're doing business in the state of New Mexico, in 2017, they passed the Data Breach Notification Act. And, like typical acts, you've got to be a lawyer to be able to decipher everything in there. But there are some very clear obligations that are put on businesses from this law. So first off, every business is required to maintain reasonable security procedures. So does your business today have reasonable security procedures in place? Well, it's open to interpretation, I'm sure, of what reasonable security procedures are. But again, that's something that a cybersecurity assessment a good cybersecurity assessment would reveal, right? Because we talk a lot when we do our cybersecurity assessments, not just about the technical areas of risk, but do you have the proper procedures in place? So I'll give you an example of a procedure, one that we implement for all of our customers and clients, which is regular phishing training on their emails for each employee that uses an email. So that's an example of what we would consider nowadays a reasonable procedure, considering that almost all these ransomware attacks are coming in through emails. It makes sense to have a procedure in place where your employees are getting regularly trained on that. And I would argue that these procedures, need to be documented. You need to be able to say, yes, here's my procedure, and you could read that procedure. And then if you're using an IT company today or a provider of some kind, and you're outsourcing that, and you're hiring someone to help you with your IT, they have the security procedures and practices in place. Can they show you their incident response plan? Does your IT provider have cyber liability insurance? Right? Because you might have cyber liability insurance, but have you read your policy? Did you know that your cyber liability insurance may go after your IT provider if you have to file a claim? The law also contains a data disposal provision, which requires that businesses that have no longer a reasonable need for business purposes to hang on to information, that information must be properly destroyed or erased. So again, when we're working with our clients, we're providing complete life cycle management, and we have our whole end of life division there that specializes in making sure that we help customers archive off that data they don't need and properly erase it with all the documentation that follows, right? So we can prove that we're following all these points. The other obligation under any business, should they suffer a breach, if even one New Mexico resident has their information breached, you're required to notify that person. You may be required as a business to provide them credit monitoring for a certain amount of time if it's expected that they may be under severe risk for that type of service or that type of act. And then if you have more than one, I think it's if it's over 1,000, you're required to notify the New Mexico Attorney General. And so when we're out there and we're talking to business owners, most of them aren't aware, of this law and don't know the types of obligations that their business might be under should they suffer a breach. So, not only are you potentially paying a ransom, to unlock your stuff or potentially keep them from publishing this information, confidential information, to the dark web. Not only are you suffering potential downtime for your business, but you're also under certain legal requirements and obligations for your business if you suffer a ransom event. So it's no surprise that up to 60% of small and medium-sized businesses that suffer a ransomware event go out of business within 6 months. So my advice today is, don't be a sitting duck. We talked about why small and medium-sized businesses are such a big target, taking up 3/4 of the ransom events perpetrated on us. It's important to raise the barrier of entry for cyber criminals. So what do we mean by that, right? Well, there's a reason why these small and medium-sized businesses are such a target. It's because the barrier for entry is very low. That the types of cybersecurity mitigation practices in place on most small and medium-sized businesses weren't sufficient 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and now it's even more of a problem. So step one, again, to figure out how to raise the barrier to entry for cyber criminals is really conducting a complete cybersecurity assessment on your business. Without that, I'd argue you really don't know what you don't know. And you're not going to have the tools to raise that barrier to entry for those cyber criminals unless you're working with a company or you have the internal expertise and tools to figure out how to raise that barrier of entry, right? And certainly most businesses aren't spending enough on cybersecurity risk mitigation, but that doesn't mean that it's out of reach for small businesses and medium-sized businesses, right? I think if anything, our business is an example of being able to provide that based on what we hear from our customers at predictable monthly costs that fit within their budget. Companies need policies and procedures in place to mitigate this increasing risk. So when you conduct a cybersecurity assessment on a business, they're looking, of course, on technical aspects of the business. Is your firewall up to date? Are you using the proper versions on your server software? Do you have the proper technology in place to detect an intruder in your network, and do you have proper technologies in place to respond to those types of anomalies? But we also talk a lot about the policies and the procedures in place that a business has that they can implement to mitigate the risk of cybersecurity threat. So one example here is cyber liability insurance. Now that market is changing very quickly, and the actuaries that calculate the risk for these big insurance providers are having a hard time producing predictable numbers that an insurance company can use to create a business model with. There's still policies out there though, and there's still providers out there writing policies. We recommend all of our clients get cyber liability insurance policies. And as part of your cyber assessment, your IT company should be reviewing that policy with you, simulating an event against it, including calling the insurance company, making sure you have the numbers written down to the insurance company and exactly what steps to follow to fill out a claim. And that all needs to be, again, not saved on your computer systems, right? If it's saved on your computer systems, first off, you're handing it right to the criminals and the hackers. If they're able to get in, they're going to be able to read your incident response plan that you have saved on your systems and know exactly how you're going to respond to it, right? So these types of policies and procedures need to be in place for the business to be able to adequately respond to one of these events. They need to have a paper firewall through cyber liability insurance companies to ultimately act as a safety net in case money does need to come out of pocket. But again, these cyber liability insurance companies, they're having a hard time with it, and they're being very strict on pushing back and making sure that your business has done its due diligence, right? It's just like a car insurance company. If you leave your car warming up in the driveway in the morning, someone walks by and drives off, keys were in the ignition, there's a very large likelihood you're not getting that claim covered due to just gross negligence. So part of your cyber assessment should make sure that you have no potential claims for gross negligence from a cyber liability insurance provider that you're working with. And the third point is not to make assumptions. You don't know what you don't know, which is why it's really important to get a second set of eyes on your policies and procedures and your IT infrastructure to make sure that you are doing the best you can to implement the strategies that are going to keep your business around and continue to be an asset for years to come. So our goal really as a business and an organization is to enable companies to flourish by using technology and to achieve their goals and directives by using technology and not become a victim to some cyber criminal from somewhere else in the world who's attacking these local companies here. 25 years ago, if a criminal wanted to attack your business or cause damage to your property, they pretty much had to be here locally, right here in Albuquerque, to cause that type of damage. And what we're seeing today is that, unfortunately, these criminal actors exist in places in the world where there's little to no law enforcement to enact justice on them. And so, in fact, everybody, as I'm sure, heard of what's going on in the geopolitical space. Russia is talking about potentially invading Ukraine, and the U.S. response has been to threaten sanctions on Russia. Now, Russia is a large source of cyber criminal gangs enacting these types of ransoms on U.S. companies. And the Russian government has come out and said that if we enact sanctions on them as a country, they will respond with increased cyber attacks on U.S. businesses. So unfortunately, these local companies, small and medium-sized businesses, are now caught up in geopolitical events and targeted by criminal gangs and hackers that don't exist anywhere within the reach of our law enforcement. These criminal gangs and hackers are so emboldened, they're directly attacking our government institutions and entities. And it's really time that every business owner and every business start taking it seriously and raise that barrier to entry for cyber criminals to, reduce the revenue that they're able to make from this, because it's extremely lucrative at this point in time. So with that, concluding this presentation, and I'd like to open it up to any chats that might be, any questions in the chat, as well as any questions that anyone else here has for us. Yes.
Is it your recommendation that people always pay their ransomware?
Well,
you might want to repeat it for the audience.
Sure. The question was, is it our recommendation that people always pay the ransomware? Well, I can tell you that thankfully, none of our clients have ever had to deal with a ransom attack. So we've never been in a position to have to work with a client dealing with a ransom attack. And there's a lot of debate out there right now regarding whether or not ransoms should be paid. There's some talk about legislating ransom payments to be illegal. So it would be against the law for a business to pay a ransom. And there's been, I believe, one state so far that passed a law making it illegal to pay a ransom with public funds. But, it really comes down to a business decision at this point in time, whether or not a ransom should be paid. Typically the de-encryption keys for ransoms don't work that well. And it's still a mighty struggle to get systems back online. And then you have that secondary now feature to most ransom events where, they've already got the information, they've already infiltrated your systems, they've taken all the confidential files, and they're just going to publish it if you don't pay that ransom. That's not a technical problem anymore. That's a business and PR and a legal problem. And really, what choice do you have depending on what kind of information they got from your business? So it's a very tricky problem to be in, whether or not to pay that ransom.
Greg, what's the easiest way to set up a cybersecurity assessment?
So what's the easiest way to set up a cybersecurity assessment? At Abqit, you can go to our website, which is down below there. Give us a call or hit us on the email and just inquire about getting one set up. We do them all the time. They take generally about a week, just depending on the size of the business, but almost all small and medium-sized businesses, we're in and out of there in a week. Very low input from the actual client. It's mainly us doing our thing without a lot of work from the business itself. But it's really easy to reach out to a company expert and get a cybersecurity assessment scheduled. And if your IT provider that you're working with today or your internal teams aren't getting these done regularly, it's a good idea to sit down with them and get their perception of your cybersecurity posture today.
In the past 2 years, have you seen an increase in cyber attacks or cyber incidents in New Mexico? And is there a trend? Are they targeting specific businesses, or is it just kind of all over the place?
So the question was whether or not there's been an increased trend in cyber attacks in New Mexico. And it's hard to answer that, mainly because these cyber events aren't something that people generally want to share with the world that happened to them, right? So as we saw, there's some legal requirements where you have to do some reporting to the Attorney General. There's some legal requirements when you have to do reporting to individuals who've potentially had their information compromised. But most of the time, the stuff that makes the news is really only the public entities that are being attacked that we hear about because they have to report it, because they can't hide what's going on. But certainly all trends from what I can tell in researching in the industry and the industry analysts are showing that there's a massive increase of these types of ransom events just overall in the United States, which of course New Mexico would be part of those trends.
So if you take somebody like me, I'm completely independent. It's just me. Nobody else opens my emails. Nobody else uses my systems. I'm fully cloud-based in real estate.
Sure.
So, in other words, I keep data on my computer, but everything is in Dropbox. How does somebody attack me?
Sure. So great question from the audience here. What if you have a small business, say 1 to 5 individuals, and they're using 100% cloud-based applications? So they're not really trying to store any personal information on their computer systems or have any of that information out there. And they're using what they believe to be secure services, software services, to do their business. Great question. So what we would do is still recommend a cybersecurity assessment for several reasons. Number one, that we mentioned in the proposal is you don't know what you don't know. So one of the scans that we do when we complete an assessment for an individual or a business is to scan the systems for personal information, or what's considered personal information, like driver's license, birthdays, social security numbers. Oftentimes people are really surprised at the amount of files that they squirreled away in different drives and places that might have that type of information on there, right? Secondarily, we would work with you on the policies and procedures in place that you have as a sole proprietor or a small business to make sure that you're not going to be a part of that sliver we saw there of those individuals getting those attacks. Examples include, multi-factor authentication. So if somebody were to compromise your laptop through a phishing email, right, and they had access to all your keystrokes, so they could see when you type in a website that you're going to, and then you type in your username and then your password, right, and they get all that information. By enabling something like two-factor authentication, you can just add one more layer of security to access these applications that run your business, where in addition to your username and password, it requires you to enter in a code that's either pushed to your cell phone through text message or some kind of authenticator app. So that's an example where, people who use software as a service type applications like maybe Dropbox or Slack or, Office 365 can still have their information compromised through accessing the passwords, getting access to the passwords. Then the hackers are simply able to log in, change credentials, change passwords, and even entirely lock up your laptop. Okay, you might be able to go get a new laptop, but then if they've gotten in all your accounts and switched everything to their recovery methodologies, right, you're still locked out of your systems.
Really, even if I could prevent that, but I'm more worried about them gaining the information. If they can get it off my computer, if they can get it in my computer, they can lock my computer and throw it in the fire pit, but they still have the information that can be exposed. That's, I guess, my number one fear, not getting the computer, right?
Right, so
information.
Exactly correct. Most of the time when a hacker gains access to a system, when you have a compromise to your systems, they don't immediately lock it up with a ransom demand. In fact, in most cases, they're behind your systems up to 6 months and behind the scenes, and they're getting information about the business. In a lot of cases, they're figuring out how much cash flow the business generates, how much money it has, so they know exactly what ransom amount to ask for that the business is likely to be able to actually afford and pay, so they get their money and don't just crash the business, because they want to make money here. So they're behind there for 6 months. They're figuring out everything they can about the business. So when they are ready to ransom it and lock it up, they know enough about the business at that point to know what to ask for. They get the information that they need that's confidential, that's going to be of value to the business, that they know the business wouldn't want published to the world to see. And then they'll show proof that they have that information, and then of course threaten to take it public. So that's certainly a danger, from a sole proprietor to any size business.
So if they happen to get employee information, social security numbers, things like that, could the business owner be at risk of being sued by the employees? Or would that be covered under their insurance? Or the cyber business, do they provide that sort of coverage?
So great question. The question is, if you get compromised and someone exfiltrates data from the business at a ransom event, and they publish social security numbers and birthdays and names of individuals that were within your business out there, could the business be held liable or get sued from those individuals? And this is an area, I think, that is fast moving part of society right now. From what I can tell, corporations are formed to limit the liability, right, of the owners. But in certain cases of true gross negligence, the corporate veil has been pierced. I don't think that's happened in the case of a cybersecurity event yet, to my knowledge. I've only heard of that happening in cases of like gross negligence related to auto accidents or something like that. But I think that, certainly I could see the industry trending that way, to where, if a breach happens and it was clear gross negligence, business not doing what should be considered table stake things today to mitigate cybersecurity risk, how that could potentially fall on the liability of, chief technology officer, CIO, CEO. I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Has there been any pushback from insurance companies paying these out if the business does not have a procedure in place to prevent some of this stuff? Or
Yeah, so the question was, has there been insurance, cyber liability insurance companies pushing back on fulfilling policies if the business is determined not to have done their due diligence to stop these type of attacks? And absolutely. So as a company, Abqit, we work with certain cyber liability insurance companies to help their clients correct their cybersecurity posture within the business, to anticipate, if there were a claim being filed, the insurance company not having to decline the claim due to lack of proper policies, procedures, and technologies in place. So, there's a significant amount of companies out there potentially paying for a cyber liability insurance policy that's not going to cover them because they're not following the proper cybersecurity risk mitigation strategies that their cyber liability insurance companies require. So absolutely, that's a major risk. And again, that's a risk that should be looked at very carefully, at least annually, especially as fast as this is changing out there in the world, and should be looked at as part of your annual cybersecurity risk assessment. Are there any other questions in the chat? Looks like we just had one drop in. Can you guys read the chats? Or?
Yeah,
It's good.
Okay, we're good.
it's down in there if you want to see them.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Well, I think with that, unless anybody has any further questions, I really appreciate everyone's time today. And I hope that nobody here ever becomes a victim of a cyber criminal attack. Thank you very much.